Hi everyone, I wanted to just pop on and show a couple of slides and make a couple of points about the discussion about the topic that we talked about this week, and that is disasters and mental health and substance abuse. And in particular, I wanted to say a few things about how disasters affect people with substance abuse. You did the reading, you've got some basic knowledge and understanding about that, but this topic is particularly salient right now, I think, just because of the coronavirus and the stay-at-home order and limited access to resources is really becoming problematic. So I just wanted to stress a couple of things here. First of all, for individuals who are either in recovering or actively experiencing a substance abuse issue, one of the biggest barriers is their inability to access treatment. So if anyone is taking medications, we know there are medications for opioid abuse. There usually are not for other drugs, but many of the narcotics there are. Or since a lot of these disorders co-occur with depression, they may be taking antidepressants, hopefully not medication for anxiety because those are addictive themselves, but medications for depression, and then just may have some difficulty getting access to those medications. They've lost their job, they don't have money, they can't get out and get that. And then, of course, limited access to counseling therapy. Many therapy places, counseling places are going to telehealth. They're doing things virtually, either over the phone or over the computer. And not everybody has access to resources to do that. Not everybody has the internet or the Wi-Fi connection or a computer or a device to do that, especially people who may be in recovery and struggling with finances. So that missing social support is going to be huge for many folks. And then there are lots of people who use peer groups as a lifeline, AA, NA, other kinds of substance abuse groups. Those groups, they really can't meet right now with the stay-at-home orders and the limitation on size. So those people are really struggling because many people rely on, especially in early recovery, one or two or sometimes several of those meetings a day just to get them through. So this is a time when people really have to rely on what they can use, which is their sponsor or their peer support if they've gotten hooked up with something like that. So what we've seen in the past, in the cases of some disasters, perhaps, things like Katrina or other kinds of hurricanes, especially more natural disasters like that, we see these support groups popping up in places, the community center that's still open. They'll have a couple of meetings a day, a couple of these support meetings a day. So this is a population, of course, we have to reach out to the mentally ill population, but especially the substance abuse population is critical during this time. It's also important to remember that substance abuse, no matter what the substance, usually impairs your judgment and that executive functioning that we count on to keep us safe. So people who are affected by this may be less prepared and less likely or able to evacuate. A lot of the people that didn't evacuate after Hurricane Katrina was because of money. And if we think about how money is often an issue for people in recovery, they literally may have nowhere else to go. And they may have alienated their family because of their substance abuse problem. They may have no one to turn to. So again, we have that social support piece, which is just critical. I want to point out that the studies find that most people who don't have a substance abuse disorder sorry about the little bark there. Most people who don't have a substance abuse disorder aren't likely to develop a new one after a disaster, but those who have a disorder or are in recovering from a disorder, even if the recovery has been long-term, those disorders may worsen. So that's really a time when a person needs help and support the most. And this is especially a problem in first responders. They are among the most who have stress and loss during a disaster. So those are the folks that really need care. Now, there's been a lot of research in the last couple of years looking at substance abuse and how things changed after trauma or disaster. But one recent study I want to mention, just done here in 2017, tried to come up with a model as to why this happens. And so here's the boiled down model. A disaster occurs. For most people, it decreases their coping self-efficacy, especially if it's something like, let's just take the coronavirus. This is not a disaster that we have a playbook for. People know how to handle tornadoes and other kinds of things, but an epidemic that is uncontrollable, being quarantined at home, is a completely different thing. So tons of people are affected and just don't know how to cope. That, of course, increases our psychological distress that we feel because we feel out of control. And then it makes us turn to the ways that we do know how to cope, which is oftentimes self-medication, especially for people who have used that in the past. So if you are not a person that self-medicates through substances, you're probably not going to turn to that in this time. But if you do have a history of that, that's much more likely to happen. So this is a pretty comprehensive model explaining. So it combines cognitive psychology and pharmacology. This is I thought this was kind of interesting for people who are doing first responder work. This is a quick scale that people can fill out, and really people can fill this out in triage or routinely, that just gives us a basic idea of whether substance abuse is a problem. So if you look at some of these questions, pretty, straightforward, yes or no. Have you used drugs in the past 12 months other than those required for medical reasons? And of course, if somebody answers yes to that, they're automatically at risk. Have you lost friends because of your use of drugs? And what it asks about here is, how is your life affected by substance use? Because it's not so much how much you use, but how is your life affected? Have you engaged in illegal activities? So of course, the more yeses you have to this questionnaire, the more at risk you are and the more help you're going to require. There are some screening questionnaires that are as short as 3 questions. This one's a little bit more comprehensive, and I like this one better. So finally, what I'd like you to do is to click on this link and go watch this quick 5-minute video, because it talks about just directly about how people who are in recovery for substance abuse are dealing with the pandemic that we have going on right now. So it's informative, it's insightful, so please go ahead and take a look at that.